When my husband Daniel Harper died at the age of 68, the house fell into a silence so deep that at first I didn't know what to do with it. For 43 years our home had revolved around his routines, his opinions, his quiet but constant dissatisfaction with everything I was. Daniel had been a respected economics professor at the provincial university, the kind of man people admired for his intelligence and calm authority. I had been the opposite, just a village girl who had barely finished high school before marrying him. Our marriage had lasted decades, but happiness had only existed in the early years, and even that now felt like a story someone else had told me. After his funeral, I finally realized something strange. My days belonged to me for the first time. No one criticized the shows I watched, the food I cooked, or the clothes I wore. Every evening I sat in the living room with the remote control Daniel used to guard like a sacred object, and watched the melodramatic soap operas he had always mocked as mindless nonsense. I ate fried street snacks he used to lecture me about. On my 65th birthday, I ordered a mango crepe cake from a small bakery downtown and lit the candles myself. As the flames flickered in the quiet room, I suddenly felt a strange emptiness. A lifetime had passed and I had never once made a wish for myself. Just as I closed my eyes, my phone rang. It was my daughter Emma, whom I rarely spoke to anymore. Her voice came through the speaker, brisk and distracted. "Mom, today is Dad's birthday too. Don't forget to cook the braised pork he liked and take it to the cemetery tomorrow." I said nothing for a moment. "Uncle already visited his grave this morning," she added impatiently, "so you don't need to go today. But you should still show respect. Dad wouldn't like it if you ignored him." When the call ended, the apartment seemed even quieter than before. I stared at the small cake in front of me, the candles melting slowly into wax puddles. Then, after a long time, I whispered the only wish I had ever truly meant. If I could live my life again, I would never marry Daniel Harper. When I opened my eyes again, someone was shaking my shoulder. "Mara, stop daydreaming and help carry these baskets." The familiar voice startled me so badly, I almost dropped the vegetables in my hands. I looked around and felt my breath catch. The dusty road, the small brick houses, the loud chatter of neighbors. It was the village where I had grown up. But everything looked younger, brighter, untouched by the decades that should have passed. My hands were smooth instead of wrinkled. My back no longer ached. In front of me stood Mrs. Bennett from the next house, exactly as she had looked when I was 22. My heart pounded as realization struck with terrifying clarity. I had returned to the day a group of university students first came to our village to conduct research. Among them had been Daniel Harper, the quiet, intelligent young man who would eventually become my husband. In my previous life, the village council had asked families to host the visiting students because the guest dormitory had been destroyed in a landslide. There were more students than rooms, and by pure coincidence Daniel had ended up staying in my home. That was how everything had begun. But now, standing there in the sunlight of the past, I understood something with painful certainty. This was the moment I had wished to change. The students arrived in the afternoon, dusty from the long bus ride, carrying notebooks and field equipment. The villagers gathered around them curiously, offering water and places to stay. I recognized nearly every face from memory, including Daniel's, tall, slender, with a thoughtful expression and glasses that gave him a scholarly air. In my previous life I had been shy and eager to please, so when the village chief asked for volunteers to host the students, I had immediately stepped forward and offered my spare room. Daniel had thanked me politely, and from that small kindness our relationship had slowly grown. But this time, when I saw him standing there talking to the chief, my chest filled not with nervous excitement, but with a deep, quiet resistance. I turned away before he noticed me and instead walked toward another student, a girl named Hannah Lee, who had later become one of Daniel's closest colleagues. "If you still need a place," I told her quickly, "you can stay with my family." She looked relieved and accepted immediately. Just like that, the course of my life shifted. Hannah followed me home with her suitcase while Daniel ended up staying with a different family across the village. The change seemed small, but I felt an enormous weight lift from my chest. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, my future did not revolve around him. That evening, as Hannah unpacked in the small spare room, I sat in our kitchen thinking about what I wanted from this second chance. In my previous life, I had believed marriage was the only path available to a woman like me. Daniel had been educated, ambitious, and admired, while I had been an ordinary girl from a rural village. When he proposed after finishing his fieldwork, I had felt incredibly lucky. For the first few years, our marriage had been gentle and hopeful. He brought me small gifts from the city and proudly introduced me as his wife to colleagues. But everything changed when his career advanced and he entered the world of academics, a world where my simple background became something he quietly resented. The more successful he became, the more distant he grew. Eventually, there was another woman, a fellow researcher named Clara Evans, whose education and elegance made me painfully aware of my own shortcomings. Though Daniel never officially left me, the love between us withered into something cold and humiliating. I spent decades taking care of his parents, raising our daughter, and managing a household that never truly felt like my own. When he died, the final words he spoke to me were filled with regret, not regret for how he had treated me, but regret for marrying me instead of Clara. Remembering that now, I felt an icy calm settle inside me. This time I would choose a different life. Over the next weeks, I avoided Daniel completely. Whenever the students came to the village store, I stayed in the back room. Whenever their research group passed our house on the way to the hills, I found some excuse to leave. Instead, I spent my time talking with Hannah. She was energetic, curious, and refreshingly straightforward. Through her, I learned about the entrance exams universities had recently begun offering again, an opportunity many young people were using to continue their education. The idea fascinated me. In my previous life, I had never imagined attending college. But now that possibility shimmered in front of me like a doorway I had somehow missed the first time around. My father, who ran the village's small supply shop, was initially surprised when I told him I wanted to study again. For years he had worried that I would remain unmarried while other women my age were already starting families. But when he saw the determination in my eyes, he slowly nodded. "If that's what you want," he said, "then try. Your life should belong to you." His support filled me with a gratitude so fierce it nearly brought me to tears. In my previous life, he had died before seeing me achieve anything beyond being someone's wife. This time I promised myself he would watch me build a future of my own. A month later, something unexpected happened. As I was closing the shop one evening, Daniel walked in and asked for soap. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the counter. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, as though he recognized something impossible. "Have we met before?" he asked slowly. My heart beat faster, but I forced my voice to remain calm. "No," I said, handing him the soap. "You must be mistaken." He lingered for a moment, studying my face with an intensity that made me uneasy, then left. That should have been the end of it. But a few days later, he stopped me near the bus station on my way to the city entrance exam. His voice was tense, almost desperate. "Mara, you know something, don't you? About the future." The words sent a chill through me. In that instant, I realized the truth. Daniel remembered our previous life too. But unlike me, he seemed confused by the changes that were already unfolding. "You're mistaken," I replied coldly. "Please move aside." When I stepped past him and boarded the bus, I felt his gaze burning into my back. For the first time, I understood that our rebirth had not given him the same clarity it had given me. While I was determined to escape our past, he seemed determined to recreate it. The following year became the hardest and most rewarding period of my life. I studied late into the night, relearning subjects I had forgotten decades earlier. My father supported me tirelessly, even expanding his shop so we could afford the books and travel expenses. Eventually, I passed the entrance exam and was accepted into a university in the city, something the younger version of me could never have imagined. Moving there felt like stepping into an entirely different world. For the first time, I lived among people who valued knowledge, ambition, and independence. I majored in business and economics, fields that fascinated me with their logic and endless possibilities. Meanwhile, my father opened a small food stall near campus using recipes we had developed together. The stall quickly became popular with students, and watching his pride grow each day filled me with quiet happiness. Life finally felt like something I was actively creating rather than passively enduring. Years passed without any sign of Daniel. Occasionally, Hannah mentioned that one of her former classmates had been struggling professionally after clashing with his professors and leaving several research teams. I suspected it was him, but I rarely asked for details. My focus remained on my studies and the small business my father and I were building together. By the time I graduated, our food stall had expanded into a modest restaurant, and I had already begun working with a group of investors interested in opening additional locations. One winter evening, as I locked the restaurant door after closing, a familiar voice called my name. I turned around and almost didn't recognize the man standing under the streetlight. His clothes were wrinkled, his face thin and exhausted, his once confident posture replaced by something fragile and uncertain. It took several seconds before I realized it was Daniel Harper. He stepped closer, his eyes filled with a complicated mixture of guilt and longing. "Mara," he said quietly, "I've been searching for you for years." The words hung in the cold night air between us. For a moment I simply studied him, remembering the proud professor he had once become in my previous life. The contrast was startling. "Why?" I asked finally. He swallowed hard before answering. "Because I understand now. I understand what I lost." He began speaking rapidly, explaining how every attempt to recreate his former success had failed. The career he once dominated had collapsed around him because he approached it with arrogance rather than patience. The woman he once believed he loved had rejected him completely. "The only thing I know for certain," he finished hoarsely, "is that the biggest mistake of my life was taking you for granted." I listened without interruption, feeling neither anger nor satisfaction, only a strange calm. When he finished, I shook my head slowly. "Daniel, we were given another chance at life. I used mine to move forward. You're still trying to rewrite the past." His shoulders sagged as if the weight of those words had physically struck him. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then I unlocked the restaurant door behind me and stepped inside. "Goodbye," I said gently before closing it. That night, as I counted the day's earnings with my father in the small office upstairs, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my heart. My life had finally become my own. The years ahead would hold new challenges and opportunities, but they would belong to the person I had chosen to become, not the woman defined by someone else's regret. And somewhere outside in the cold, a man who once believed he controlled my fate finally understood that some second chances are meant not for reconciliation, but for freedom.